These little details, these things that you notice, especially when you have a really good tour guide who's pointing everything out to you, like everything in a pleasant way, as opposed to saying, well, there's the living room, there's the kitchen, hope you enjoyed the tour. You don't get your money's worth with that kind of thing. The detail, the magic of Bach's music is in the detail. If you're learning to play the piano and wondering how to bring some magic to your performance, think of yourself as a musical tour guide. The notes on the page are the blueprint, the floor plan of your beautiful castle, and it's your job as the performer to find the structure in those notes, to find the details and all the little intricacies that your visitors to the mansion want to see. Be a good tour guide. That is the focus of this tutorial for Invention number 14 in B-flat major by J.S. Bach. Well, hi there, it's me, Penny. Welcome back to my practice room. This tutorial is full of different things, including fingering, how I finger this piece. I've got some thoughts about pedaling, some thoughts about motives, macro structure, just basic structural stuff, things that I listen for, and perhaps some of the difficulties and challenges, technically speaking, that you might encounter along the way as you practice this piece. This is just a two-part piece. It's just for two voices. So this is sort of intermediate level repertoire. And as I said in the opening, our job at the piano is to communicate through sound. But in order to do that, we have to know what to listen for. Where are the details? What are the interesting sights and sounds along this musical tour? So, I have prepared for you a copy of this score marked with all sorts of different colors. You'll see it on the screen here. And we're going to get into each one of those colors in a little bit of detail here, and I'm hoping that will jumpstart some imagination on at your next practice session. There's a lot on the page there. We're going to get into that, fingering and motives, etc. But I just want to offer a couple of basic things to start. When we're looking at a piece of music, especially if it's something new that we're just beginning to learn, it's like looking at a map. You want to just get the lay of the land. What do you notice? What stands out? What is important? Well, when we do that here, we see that we're in B-flat major, we're in common time, and of course it's for two parts, two voices. And we can see that it's not a terribly long piece. In fact, of the 15 two-part inventions, this number 14 is the shortest of all. It's only, 20 bars long. Very short piece. The longest of the inventions is number 6 in E major. That one is 62 bars, and that's not counting the repeats. So there's a great discrepancy between the lengths of the shortest and longest in the set of 15 inventions. So that is worth noting. If you've watched my video about, I think it was titled Getting Creative with Chromatic Saturation, something like that, in this particular piece, we can look at all of the notes on the page and find that every one of the 12 chromatic pitches, except for one, and that is D flat, is present in this piece. All the notes of the 12-note chromatic scale present in the piece, except for D flat. But yet, we don't see a whole lot of accidentals, so it's not exactly a very chromatic or spicy to the ears kind of piece. What else do we notice? We notice motives. We notice certain rhythmic motives in particular that get repeated. The 32nd notes, there's a lot of them in this piece. Yada-da-da-dum-bum-bum-bum-bum-bum. This little rhythm basically permeates the entire piece, and it begins in one hand, then the other hand gets it, and then they're alternating one after the other, and then eventually they're together. But that rhythm persists. And this is something that I found interesting in playing Bach's music, is that much of the time, if not most of the time, he repeats a rhythmic motive again and again and again. And it's not terribly sophisticated. This rhythm, that's nice, but it's not. There's no syncopation and polyrhythms and all sorts of funky stuff going on. It's just a series of very short notes. But the variety of intervals between those notes, the directions, the contour of the notes, this is where the magic of Bach's music sets in, I think. So that is something to keep in mind, because if we're not careful about that and we just see, oh, good, this is just got the same rhythm over and over. Oh, it's nice and easy. Good. Whew, I can mentally check out there. Well, not good, because what's going to happen with that mindset? Your playing's going to sound very notey, where all the notes, like carbon copies of one another, or like a machine, everything just running the same way over and over and over. So within these repetitive rhythmic figures, we want to look for places where there are surprises. What stands out to the eyes and the ears? I remember when I was little, my mom and I I'm from Northern Ontario, and my mom and I would go to Duluth, Minnesota in the summer. She went to university there, and we loved it. And one of the things that we did was to visit the Glen Sheen Mansion. I would imagine it's still there. I hope so. And it was this beautiful old house, and we took tours of it, and it's just beautiful furniture everywhere. And we would just get so excited about this house and this tour, and all the little teacups and the little paintings and the furniture and the Chippendale chairs with the claw going over the ball on the leg of the foot, and drapes and rugs and just porcelain figures from all over the world, woodwork carved in decorative ways. These little details, these things that you notice, especially when you have a really good tour guide who's pointing everything out to you, like everything in a pleasant way, as opposed to saying, well, there's the living room, there's the kitchen, hope you enjoyed the tour. You don't get your money's worth with that kind of thing. The detail, the magic of Bach's music is in the detail. And when we see things repeated over and over, we have to look deeper into it to find where there is variety and bring those things out. So this is all just some of the general things I notice if I'm beginning the piece. What else do I notice? Well, we don't have any ornaments. It's kind of worth noting. There's no trills, mordants, things like this. And the piece, as I say, is in B flat major. We have a very, at a glance, you can pretty well tell, if you have some, basic theory skills, you can tell that we're in the dominant, which is F major, by measure 6. And then that's when the chromaticism sets in. That spot at measure 6, I would say, is sort of the B section of the piece, the middle section of the piece. We can call the first 5 bars the A section. But this B section, this is where we get a little bit of development of this rhythmic idea. And then we're firmly back in the home key of B flat major in the middle of measure 16. And I would say that is the kind of a return of the main section, the return of the A section. So that is, in a nutshell, the general bits and bytes. There was this commercial, the Bits and Bytes commercial. I don't know if you remember that, when I was like 15 or so. This is in Northern Ontario, and the commercial would come on for the Bits and Bytes. There's some sort of a snack, the little pretzels and little cheese nips and things in there. We never bought it at our house, but I loved the commercial. It was a cartoon, and it showed this guy, and he was like putting his hand into the bag and like talking about all the exciting little bits and bytes that he's pulling out. And I used to imitate this commercial. It would crack my dad up. Oh, I'll just reach in here. What have I got? Oh, we got a little pretzel there. What have we got? Oh, we got a little cheese cracker there. Oh. So the bits and bytes, if you will, are what we just covered here. And those are the basic essentials that you want to have firmly in your mind as you begin playing the piece. A couple of other general things about this piece in its sort of relation to some of the other things that Bach wrote. And I got these particular points from one of my most valuable texts, and that is this book called The Interpretation of Bach's Keyboard Works. It was written by Erwin Bodke, and it is wonderful. I rescued this book from what I believe was a dumpster bin. So it's found a happy home. And he talks in here about how this Invention 14, I wrote it down here, has some thematic material with these 30-second notes that is reminiscent of the beginning, the first movement, prelude, of the Partita number 1 in B flat major. And the same key, B flat major. So that's kind of interesting. And he also says that the G minor prelude, that's number 16 in volume 1 of the Well-Tempered Clavier, uses a similar rhythm to this one in Invention 14. So there you have some general bits and bytes for this invention. Now, I want to get into some motivic. I don't like the word analysis. It frightens me. Theory was never my strongest subject, so I'm just going to approach this as a pianist. That's what works for me, and what gets me excited. So the first motive that I've been listening, I've played this piece many times. I'm practicing it again so that I can record it here on the channel shortly. But we get this motive, right, that's over and over again. And I noticed, as I was analyzing this first motive, I noticed something interesting. In a nutshell, Bach creates the effect in these mere 20 measures that the piece is speeding up, I think, because that rhythm in the beginning of the piece is generously given to one hand at a time. And then as we get into the middle of the piece, that motive doesn't stay in each hand for quite as long. It gets tossed back and forth more quickly, more sooner. And then eventually over towards the end of the piece, it's like every beat we're getting that rhythm. And then finally at the end, the hands are in imitation, and it's quite intense. So just the tempo doesn't change, but the sheer fact that this rhythm is occurring more frequently as the piece progresses, I think, is a very clever way that Bach uses to intensify and make more dramatic this piece. So let's get into that a little bit more. And of course we have someone cutting their grass outside. Hope it's not too disruptive. We'll play over it. So getting into this first motive here. Measure 1. The right hand has it 2 times. It goes up, and then it goes down. Does the same thing in measure 2. Goes up, and then it goes down. Then measure 3 starts the same, goes up, but then it goes up again. So we had up, down, and then up, up, all in the right hand. The left hand has not had that motive yet until now. And here at measure 4 rather, into measure 5, this is where we get a little sequence. A musical sequence is just a pattern of intervals that gets repeated, usually 2 or 3 times, either down or up. Descending sequences, it seems to me, not that I've done a thesis on the topic, but just having played a lot and noticing things, there's more descending sequences than ascending. I don't know why. They sound better, quite frankly. But anyhow, it's just what I've noticed. So that's what we have there, the little sequence, and that brings us to the dominant of F major. And it's at this point that the left hand gets its turn at bat, as it were, with that motive of, and it follows the lead of the right hand. So left hand in measure 6, it goes up. I'm left-handed. It's very hard for me to point with my right hand. You'll have to forgive the awkwardness of this hand. Right? So the left hand goes up. Oh, geez, this is really weird. And then it goes down. And then, like the right hand, it goes up again. And then it goes down. And then, like the right hand, it goes up. And instead of going down, what does it do? It goes up again. Now we're into the middle of the piece. Well into the middle of the piece. This is such a short piece. Already we're in the middle. And it's at this point in measure 9 where we start to see the accidentals. Accidentals are not musical mistakes, as the name would imply, but accidentals are notes that do not belong in the home key. Our home key is B flat major. And we know that in the key signature of B flat major, we have a B flat and an E flat. The notes in between, C, D, F, G, A, those are the notes of the B flat major scale. Anything else, like an G sharp or an F sharp or a C sharp, whatever, these notes are not part of B flat major. They're chromatic notes. And if the composer wants to use one, then they put an accidental in front of the note. And this is where we get the accidentals. And the accidentals always seem to intensify when we get to the middle of the piece, because that's where things are stirring up and getting more dramatic. You know, we're no longer just entering the Glen Sheen mansion and looking at the lovely entranceway, you know, and the mirror on the wall and the carving of the bird on the mantelpiece. But we've now entered the house. We've entered the musical house. We're going up the stairs, and we're really getting a peek into this musical room, right? And these chromatic notes, these accidentals, must not be taken for granted, you know. And that's why I was singing them. I'll put a card up to a video here where I was singing the notes, some of the notes of this piece. And there's another video too where I was talking about chromatic saturation using some colored pencil crayons and with this very piece. So maybe those will be helpful as well. But bottom line, measure 9, we start to get some accidentals. And here, as I was saying, with that motive and how it Bach creates the sense that the music is heating up and maybe even speeding up in a way, though not literally from a tempo perspective, by way of this motive being exchanged more frequently between the hands. This is where it starts to happen, measure 9. So where we had 2 bars at the beginning of right hand, 3 bars actually of the right hand, we now have just 1 bar, right? Measure 9. And instead of doing 2 more bars of that like he did at the beginning, the left hand gets it. Down. Can't point. bar for the left hand, and then 1 bar for the right hand. Right? So for those 3 bars, measure 9, 10, and 11, each hand got 1 bar, as opposed to the previous bars in which each hand got 3 bars at a time, right? And then at measure 12, that rhythm happens on every beat. The hands are alternating. Left. This is measure 12. And then it goes down, and the hands are together at 14. This passage here. So they're in unison, not in unison, but the rhythm is in unison, if you will, for lack of a better term. Same rhythm in both hands on every beat. So it's this sense that things are heating up, that things are bubbling and moving along and very playful and lively. That brings us to a sequence. We have the 2 sequences in this piece. The second and final sequence there in the middle of measure 14. This spot. Again. Again. One more time. And that brings us to the return of the home key, B flat major, in the middle of measure 16. And here I consider this the return of the main section. Notice that now it's the left hand that has the theme. The right hand had it to start the piece. For this return of the A section, the left hand has it. But the right hand immediately enters with it, and the hands are in quite intense imitation. And then left hand does it again. Right hand, left hand, right hand, left, right, left, left, right, left, right. They're like good little soldiers, right? And that rhythm is just flying back and forth, as opposed to just 3 bars at a time per hand. So that was something I thought was quite interesting. But, and I should put on the screen here the colored markings that I have for you. So let's just look at the black, the things in black there that you see. So I got the A sections and the B section. I marked in the keys, and I marked in the sequences. So that's the basic form as far as I can tell. Now we're going to look at the green boxes on there, and this is something I really had a lot of fun with. Now those green boxes occur around groups of 4 notes at the ends of the rhythmic gesture or motive that we just looked at. These notes, which come at the end of. And I tried isolating just those groups of 4 notes as they progress throughout the piece in each hand. And it was quite curious and interesting to listen to. Let me play it for you. So just those green boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we get the sequence. And now measure 6. Here we are again. Left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right hand. 2, 3, 4. Left. 2, 3, 4. 1. Right. 2. 3. Sorry. There we go. 4, 1. And now here, this is measure 12. I consider this mostly C harmony here. long. It's a long-term movement up by step. Measure 12, C, C, up to D in 13, D, up a step to E flat, and then we got that sequence 14, F, D, E flat, C, D, B flat, C, A, B flat there, middle of 16, and we get those green boxes coming back again. The back end of measure 16, left hand, 3, 4. So you can see there in the back end of 16, when the left hand has this, the return of our A section, the hands are alternating da-dee-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum, very rapid fire back and forth, not like earlier in the piece at all, right? Let's hear it once. So the left hand, it's just so delightful as opposed to the beginning. There was more space between each of those green boxes, but here it's very active, right? So what is our cue as pianists? Take note. Show the listener, show your guests on the musical tour that this is the culmination of much rigorous development and build-up of this rhythmic motive over time. That reminds me of a quote that I came across, speaking of time, that is, and space, in this book, McLuhan in Space, A Cultural Geography by Richard Cavell. I'm just very, very beginning of the book, but already I've penciled in a whole bunch of notes and writing stuff in the margins, as I always do. I can't resist. I have such a hard time reading before bed because it turns into research. I have a pencil and notepad by my pillow. Once in a while, we just have to pick up a comic book, and that way I'm not prone to research. But this quote, as I say, I came across in this book. The quote is from the Canadian painter who was actually born in England or in the UK, and his name was Bertram Brooker. And he said, "It may be interesting to those who are little acquainted with any sort of art technique to know that division of space is not merely a law of layout, but a fundamental of all art." Division of space. In music, it's division of silence, really. Where to put the sounds in between the silence. But that idea of the layout and the floor plan, like I'm trying to relate the theme of this tutorial to being a good tour guide and having a lay of the land kind of mindset. Knowing where you're going, this is your musical map, and how Bach uses the space. Every bar of this piece has 4 beats in it. It's not like the bars suddenly get shorter as we get through the piece. It's just, but it kind of feels like that's the case because of this motive getting spun out more rapidly than in the front of the piece. So these kinds of things, they may not relate directly to hand position and posture and your pedaling and technique and finger strength and independence, rotation, blah, 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 tone color. I could go on and on. But it's part and parcel of delivering a communicative performance. I don't believe that there's a right or wrong way to play. I've been encountering some comments where people say, you should not use pedal in Bach, for one thing. That's come up a few times. Or that you must not move when you play the piano, or you must not sing when you play the piano. Wow. I had a wonderful education, some of the best piano teachers in the world. I've been so privileged to have them. Barry Snyder, Constance Keene, and even my teachers in Sault Ste. Marie when I was growing up. Nobody ever told me, ever, even, Jean-Paul Sevilla in France, I had some lessons with him, and then various other master classes with people along the way, or even observing other people performing in master classes with famous people. I don't think I can ever remember a time where I was told, sit still, Penny, don't move at the piano, or you must not use your foot at the pedal. Never. Goodness gracious. So there are clearly different thoughts out there, and those people feel strongly about it, clearly, and they have a right to that. They're entitled to an opinion. That does not work for me. I think I have I've had an athletic interest all my life. I played ringette. I played on the girls' basketball team in high school. I golfed a lot. I played baseball, and I loved playing football with my dad, and just hitting the ball with the baseball bat as well, and tennis, although I was not so good at that. But that when you're into sports, I mean, I often wonder if an athlete watched my videos, if they would be inclined to say, oh, this person moves too much, or if they might find something similar to what they do as an athlete. Because for me, it's just, I need to move. I'm feeling this music in me, and I'm hearing all these things that I'm trying to put into words to you about. And there's just so much going on in my mind as I'm listening to it. It's absolutely enchanting to play this music, and it's a real privilege. And I could not possibly bring any sparkle to the music if I had to sit in a straitjacket. And I've tried. I actually thought that might make an interesting video, and I played one of the Sinfonia 15 that I just put up. I tried playing that very motionless and still, and this is not me. This is like some stranger at my piano. So you have to do what works right for you, and sit however you want, so that you can play for hours and hours on end and feel good. That's what good posture to me is. If you can play for many hours and have no pain and be in enjoyment, then you're doing something right. But, find something to say in the music and say it with passion. So those are the motives that I've been trying to bring out. Now let's get into next on my little list of things here are the macro level notes. And those macro level notes, you'll see, are the ones that I've put a little yellow square around. Now, this is not something that I learned as a particular exercise given to me by one of my piano teachers. But it's just sort of something I've concocted over the years, in more recent years, actually. Of course, I've always been taught from the beginning, to sing each voice in a fugue or in an invention. But going beyond that and singing other things and finding deeper things to listen for in the music has become a bit of an obsession with mine, because I do love voicing in this music. And what was it? There's another quote in this book from Marshall McLuhan, who said, page 20, equilibrium is not possible at the speed of light. And that stuck with me too. This idea that in the electronic age, especially now, things are moving so incredibly fast. And if you think about modern art and the breakup of perspective and cubism instead, and shapes being kind of space being manipulated with. I think one of the things that makes Bach's music so not appropriate, that's not the word, but so applicable to modern society is because there's so much going on in this music. This is polyphonic music. This is just a little 2-part piece. But even so with this, it seems to reflect this increasing speed up of life in general, thanks to electricity and what it's done, and just things move faster and faster and faster. The speed of light, equilibrium, not possible. I am not a scientist, so I'm not going to unpack that quote from a scientific perspective, but it really makes me ponder that phrase at the piano, and why I love to play Bach's music. As I've said before and will always say, it's just so beautiful. For one thing, it's also so beautifully structured, and it's a kind of escapism. But in terms of the voicing and all the I want to hear some of this voice, and then I want to jump down to that voice. And if it's a 4-voice piece, then maybe I want to hear a little of that middle voice, and then suddenly snag down to the bottom, and then the top, and like things moving and shifting like a prism, and you're turning it, or a piece of crystal glass. When I was in Ireland a few years ago, I went to the Waterford Crystal Factory and watched them make the glass. And when you turn that under the light and you can see the prism of colors, and it's always changing. I feel that's what my ears are hearing with this music. Everything's changing. It's not like just one single melody with some accompaniment on the bottom. It's rather kind of static. I seem to recall reading somewhere, and for the life of me, I cannot find where this quote came. Somewhere I wrote it down in one of my notebooks. I got umpteen notebooks. But I think it said that the melody, as we know it, is really a product of the era in which people started to own property. And it kind of makes sense. A solo melody, this is mine, this is me kind of thing. But Bach's music has so many melodies happening at once. It's like a mosaic. Many little tiles making up the picture. And I don't know, maybe I have some ADHD or something like that. I don't know. But this need for constant stimulation of voicing is really a bit of an obsession for me. And so that's why I try to keep digging deeper into my little sandbox and find grains of gold. I think there's a book somewhere that's called The Road Less Traveled. That me, if I believe that I can find something magical to bring out in the piece, that requires me to go down a path of creating a rather peculiar method of practice that I know is not something that is standard teaching, such as this singing, as I put up in some previous videos, then I'm going to do it. You bet your booties I'm going to do it. Whatever I can come up with to try to bring this music fresh life. And the more I do that, I find the more I get lost in the music, not in a bad way, but like in a good way. and when I'm moving at the piano, my arms are doing this, I get all sorts of criticism. I've had some there's been a few harsh comments. It's kind of, you don't get those words when you perform in public. Most of the comments have just been really wonderful. That I have to save them, for a rainy day. But there's been a few people commenting on my gestures and my movements. I can't help it. I'm hearing a prism, a mosaic in my mind, and I'm left-handed, so it's my left hand that's doing most of this moving business. But and I've said this before in a video, it's like I'm trying to, when I'm bringing my hand up and moving it like this away from the piano, it's not conducting. It's not that at all. It's more like as though the sound is existing here rather than coming out of the piano. It's existing here, and I'm trying to like squeeze it and coax it and mold it like a sculptor. I don't know if that it makes any sense, but I have a passion for it, and I love it. And it's a strange approach to playing, as I apparently anyway, as I'm learning. But it works for me, and apparently some of you seem to appreciate it. So that's why I want to try to explain some of these things. And the yellow notes there are the ones that I was singing in a video. I'll put a card to that video for you so you can check that out. But these are the notes that I consider like macro level. If you zoom in real close, these are not the notes that I'm listening for. If you zoom in real close for listening for details in this piece, I'm listening for like kind of overlapping or finger pedal between the 32nd notes and much rotation. And then on a little, if you zoom your microscope away, pull back a little bit, then I'm listening for that motive. And then maybe, actually, you could zoom it in a little bit more for this one. Those ones. But then to really pull back that magnifying glass or that microscope, it's these notes in yellow. And as I've said many times in my videos, I try to listen for long-term movement by step in Bach's music. And that's what I found here with these yellow notes. B flat for the whole 2 bars, A, measure 3, and then the little sequence, B flat, E flat, A, D, G, C, F, and then F continues through the next few bars, and then E natural, F, and then in that middle section, F sharp, where we get the accidentals, G, and another one, A flat. See, I'm not going to sing them all for you because I've already done that in a video, but that is what I consider the big picture, the not missing the forest for the trees. Well, this is the forest view. This is the pullback, the pan shot. Is that what they call it in film, as opposed to the close-up? So, and I forgot to mention one thing about the little motive in the green boxes. Part of what I really think is important and so easy to miss when you're playing this in those green boxes is to take for granted or to not listen carefully for the last note of those 4-bar unit or 4-note units. Go to there. I feel like it's so easy to not give length to the 16th note at the end of those green boxes. Bum, bum. And that's why I like to isolate them, as I showed you earlier. Bum, bum. You could practice, as I'm doing right now, just those green boxes, the 4 notes, with a little fermata on the last one. Singing too, if you like. A fermata is just a pause. So just sit on that last note and let it sink into your ear. Go to there. Go to there. Go to there. Give them some melodic quality and a little more support from your back muscles and your upper arm with good fleshy pad of the finger, so that those notes are a bit more bell-like than the notes before them. So it's like shading, like a painter, creating more depth with a certain kind of brush stroke. Someone commented a while back that I remind them of Bob Ross. Happy trills, happy pedaling. This is your piece when you're playing it. You put your pedal, you put your trees wherever you want. Those are happy pedals, happy trees, you know. I like Bob Ross. Yeah. Okay, so moving on then. I think, is it fingering? We're getting close to fingering. We've talked about the various motives and this macro level listening. And the singing those notes as you play is the best way to get them in your ears. Next is articulation. And I want the focus of this particular point to be on the 30-second notes. There are books, including this one here by Erwin Bodke, that suggests you should play the 30-second notes this way and the eighth notes that way. When I find that kind of thing in a book, I tend to head for the hills and pick up this one instead, something that's completely non-musical. I have a hard time with do this, don't do that kind of approach. I find tremendous wonder and enchantment in just following my own path, using the skills that I have from my education and these various other supplemental resources. But the articulation, certainly, regardless of your level, if you're an intermediate self-taught or a student working on an exam or whoever, maybe advanced perhaps, the 30-second notes are problematic, especially when you get them in the third and fourth fingers. The fourth finger is just, it's just how the hand is built. It's not as independent as the other fingers. So I think it's a good thing to keep your fingers as curved as possible when you are playing these 30-second notes. You don't want to get smudged, like a window that needs to be washed get the Windex out with, nose prints and fingerprints and stuff. We don't want that kind of sound in our playing, which could be a little bit like this. It's like a wheel that's wobbly. We want it to spin and be nice and tight. I'm always telling students, in order to get good clarity and thrust and spin in your articulation, to break apart a passage into little bits. And not just into a half bar chunk, but into a 1 beat or half a beat chunk. If I take the left hand, because let's face it, they're a little harder in the left hand, these 30-second notes. The one that measures 6. Just take the first 3 notes of. Notice, too, that this rhythmic motive that we've been talking about always starts with a rest. I've said before, pianists are notorious sniffers, and it helps. So use the even though you've got a rest on the front of the beat, still energize that bit of silence, that rest needs to be energized so that you're not coming down hard on the note after the rest, and the note is then sounding like the downbeat. No, the rest is the downbeat. So breaking it into little bits, doing some overlapping where you play a note, hold the key down, play the next one, hold it down, and then release the first. Overlapping. You do it really slowly. That helps to build connection as well. Very forte and very, very staccato. This kind of thing, really flicking the note. Flicking from the first joint of the finger with the pad of the finger making contact, and a little bit of a jerk from the wrist kind of thing. And upper arms very loose. That method of practice, especially when you're breaking it up into just a few notes at a time, will help. And as the passage goes up or down, then you angle your hand, your wrist, and your arm accordingly. So that is what I wanted to say about articulation. And that brings me now to fingering. And for this, I have marked in the fingering on that diagram for you. So I'll pull that up on the screen. And you can have a look at it here. I did play this piece in an overhead view. So why don't we take a listen/look to that right now. Okay, so that's the fingering that I'm using in this piece. I've put up a few fingering videos before. I'll link those here as well for you to check out. Now, I have talked about fingering and a few of the main points that stand out, which are worth repeating now, whether you watch those other videos or not. And those are the idea of constant movement of the hand, utilizing all the fingers, not just trying to do the bulk of the job with, a couple of fingers. Whatever, good enough. Whatever. Those are the fingers I text with. That's the finger I, wipe my eye with, whatever. No, use the whole hand, all 5 fingers. Constant motion, constant rotation. I got so many notes for that. I get nervous about making tutorials. I'm much more comfortable playing. And while I don't enjoy watching shorts, because I just don't like them, but I love making them. When it comes to tutorials, it just brings me back to flashbacks of, my dissertation and, it's like trying to be thorough, but yet trying to keep fresh content on a regular basis. I marvel at the people who just can speak so candidly in front of the microphone and just, so relaxed and a little bit awkward here. But the passion is there for sure. And so, as I say, with the fingering, you want to keep your hand always in motion, sliding on the key, this kind of thing. If you go back and watch that part in the video just now where I was playing, you'll see a lot of this kind of motion, sliding front and back on the key. Another thing that I was doing particularly in this piece was very fast opening of the hand to prepare the fingers and the hand for what's to come. If the notes are going up and maybe there's a wider interval, the wider the interval, the more you have to prepare and open your hand and rotate one way or the other. I also was doing very fast crossovers. These were things that are all essential finger substitutions as well. Now, I've marked in the finger substitutions for you in red. That's where you see a number with a little slash followed by another number. That just means I'm playing the note with the first number. For instance, measure 1, left hand. The first note there. I'm playing it with 2 and I'm substituting to 1. I do it a few times in this piece, much more in some other pieces. I was taught, I think it started in my undergrad, at the Eastman School of Music, this idea of finger substitution, and it was just common practice from then on to do it. It might have been mentioned occasionally in my high school years, but certainly starting when I went away to school. And it's so essential. Rosalind Turek, the very wonderful Bach pianist, now deceased, has written about this subject and how important are finger substitutions. As well, she talks about how frequent changes of fingering are essential when playing the music of Bach. So use the whole hand, because that's the goal, I think, in this music, besides, delighting the listener, is to show good clarity of part playing, to hear each of these voices. And the only way you can do that is if you can get your hand where it needs to be ahead of time. That's all fingering is. And no, just like no two shoes will fit the same person, we all have different sizes and shapes of hands. I've said before, my hands are not large. They're kind of wide and thick, but they're not long. I cannot reach a 10th comfortably at all. If I'm playing a really slow piece, then maybe I can get a 10th if it's very quiet. But I do not have long fingers. And you may have very lovely long fingers, which I would love to have, And so your fingering will be different from my fingering. And what was it? Anton Rubinstein, who once said, "Play with your nose if you must, but produce euphony." Beautiful sounds, euphony, right? It doesn't matter what fingers you use, so long as you're bringing the music to life and that it feels good. And it just happens that, I think, for it to feel good and to sound good, you use as much of the hand as possible, and always in motion. You would have seen in that overhead just now, this kind of movement, constant rotation. And when I open to reach for a note, it's not opening your hand literally like this, like in real life, away from the piano, but opening like that if I need to reach in that direction, or, reaching. I don't want to use the word aggressively because that implies harshness, but with assertiveness. Reach with assertiveness. The fingers need to be assertive. They need to know where they're going. And it's not that you're going to play the piece necessarily vivace, but the movements to get where you need to be ahead of time need to be fast. Even in a slower piece, you got to make the movements fast so that you can prepare your hand. If you only get to the note at the very last minute, then you've no way to prepare for a golden sound, for good use of the arm and rotation so that the tone is not harsh. But to do those things, you have to get to the note in advance of when it's supposed to be played. I also wanted to mention, in keeping with this idea of constant movement of the hand, there are places where not much is going on, and yet I'm still moving. Also, I lift a lot too, and actually, those are the things that I've marked in blue when I'm lifting off the key. But an analogy that came to my mind as I was preparing for this was, and it always goes back to sports, I'm sorry. I had a hard time when I went away to school for the first time after high school. I was very athletic and I played on these various teams and I really enjoyed it. Not as much as piano, granted, but I loved it, especially our ringette games. Oh, I loved that. And I just kind of assumed that there would be other students that were sort of into that when I went to music school, but that was not the case. Everyone was all, I need to watch my hands, and they're like fragile. And I just wanted to throw the football around and bounce the ball and get the hockey stick out. And But there was nobody really to play with in that regard. So that was sad. But I think the athletic aspect of how I play, it certainly works for me, and I don't have any pain when I play either. And as I say, the analogy that came to my mind was of a baseball player, when they're at bat, and they never, I suppose a handful of them do, but 9 times out of 10, when they're at the plate waiting for the pitcher to throw the ball, they're moving, right? And everyone has it's kind of fun to watch. They all have different mannerisms. Some of them kind of spin the bat and hold it in a funny way, and some of them do this thing with their leg. Others stand very upright and wiggle the bat, but they're moving, right? Same thing with a goaltender, like a goalie in a hockey match. Maybe the bulk of the play is down in the opposite end of the rink, but if he's just sitting there like this, chugging on the water bottle, leaning on the stick, waiting for the play to come back in his own end or her own end, when it does, she or he is not going to be ready for it. All of these things are at play for me anyway at the piano, and it feels good to play. So maybe you want to think about these things in your own practicing. But if you're not using finger substitutions, then by all means begin doing so. Last but not least, we still have to talk about pedaling. But before we do that, I just wanted to quickly, in case you haven't seen the recent shorts video that I put out, I'm going to do it here right now because it's very short. I've been having some fun playing Bachwards, playing some passages backwards. And I did that in this piece for measure 14 through 16. This spot. Which is intervals of a third over and over and over again. And thirds, of course, are warm and delicious and very consonant, very pleasing to the ear. And so when you play it back, it's still warm and cozy, thirds, but with a bit of a kick. So here's that passage played backwards, starting in measure middle of 16, going backwards to 14. kind of fun, eh? Not as good as the original, of course, but it works, right? Bach's music lends itself surprisingly well to manipulation. I always like to say that it's tamper-proof. And Rosalind Turek was the one where I got this idea from. In her book, she mentions how it's good for the student to play the inventions with inverted voices. And by that, she meant switching the hands. And I did this. I wrote them all out. You can find that sheet music online. I'll put a link to that as well. But again, the music lends itself well to backwards and switched hands and you name it. I don't think this is absolutely essential for practicing. But is there value in it? Yes. Yes. It gives the ears a fresh treat. And the fingers makes them have to pay attention a little bit more and perhaps not take the notes for granted. And wouldn't you know, my last batch of footage was out of focus. Dang. So you'll have to forgive me for switching settings here for this last leg of the journey, which relates to pedaling. Fortunately, my pedal footage is in focus, and we'll get to that in a moment. But pedal in this piece, you really don't need very much of it, I don't think. Little touches of pedal. Now you're going to see some footage of my foot, literally footage. And I'm playing not the whole piece. I don't think you need to see the whole piece with my foot because, as we've seen, this piece is rhythmically quite repetitive, and we really don't need much pedal, I don't think. So I've played the first few bars, first 3 or 4 or whatever bars, both slowly and then more up to speed. And then I did the same thing for a passage midway through the piece, measure 12, for a few bars there as well, both slow and fast. In the slow performances of these excerpts, I wanted you to be able to, I played it slowly so that you could see how often my foot is changing the pedal. This is the damper pedal here we're talking about, the pedal on the right. And when I play it slowly, or when I'm practicing the piece at a snail's pace, as Leschetizky used to say, I'm pedaling, now don't gasp, but I'm pedaling basically every 32nd note. For the most, I'm pedaling very often, certainly every 16th note. Very, very frequent changes of pedal. Just like Rosalind Turek said, frequent changes of fingering is good in Bach's music. I think frequent changes of pedal is also good. And as I say, you only need pedal touches, just little touch. Put it a quarter of the way down. You don't have to push it all the way down. As I like to say, the pedal is not like a light switch where it's either on or off. Think of it like a dimmer. There's many, like a really high-end dimmer, you know, and you can just use a little bit, or you can more, or you can like max out all the way. We just need little touches of pedal. And one of my favorite pianists was Ignacy Jan Paderewski, the Polish pianist from the Golden Age, as it's known, long ago, late 19th, early 20th centuries. And in his recordings, you can hear the wonderful quality of tone that he got. And he was a student of Leschetizky, but I think his footwork was really stunning. And he wrote about it too, and that you should change the more frequent the pedal changes, the better. Because we don't want to use pedal to make something legato and more smooth and connected, or to get out of a tricky spot and just like a band-aid. Oh, I don't want to deal with this problem. I'm just going to put pedal down and cover it up, then we can't hear my mistakes. No, you want the fingers generating absolutely clear, sparkling articulation, good rhythmic energy, and variety of voicing. But much of the color and the tone quality, the singing quality, the warmth of tone, as opposed to harshness and like brassy, brittle, not pleasant to listen to sounds, can be diminished when you're not only using much of the pad of the finger, but also these many frequent changes of pedal. And I'm using the pedal here as a coloring device. That's what I'm doing. I'm using it to help warm up the sound. And so when I play it really slowly, I'm pedaling extremely frequently, almost every note. And then as I speed it up, obviously you cannot pedal every 32nd note. That is absolutely impossible. But still, changing several times, a couple of times per beat on average kind of thing, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see that in the footage. One other thing I want to say about pedaling, and clearly I have no qualms about using the pedal in the performance of Bach's music. I've had a very fine education at Eastman School of Music and Manhattan School of Music for the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. I had wonderful teachers, and none of them ever hinted at there being anything wrong with using pedal in Bach's music. They all embraced the pedal. In fact, as far as I know, the teachers in the piano department in general were okay with this. I mention this because it's come up lately in some of the comments of some of the shorts videos that I've made, and it has surprised me. But regarding pedal, I've been scolded on a few occasions for using it in Bach's music. And these folks are clearly very passionate about defending the lack of use of the pedal in Bach's music if you're playing it on the piano. And the argument seems to be that Bach did not have this gadget on his instrument, so therefore, even though I have it, I should not use it. And that is one approach to take. It is a foreign approach to me. I have never had a teacher express that belief ever. So it's kind of been a surprise to me to hear these comments. And you must do what's right for you. If you do not believe that you should be using pedal in Bach's music, or you don't like how it sounds, then don't use it. You know, this is like cooking, really. You're trying to create a meal for the ears that is enjoyable for as many people as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to like what you're eating, what your ears are chewing on. And not everyone will like it. I happen to like the way I play, and I hope some others will as well. But as long as I enjoy it, and I'm stimulated by the ideas, and I'm seeking to improve my touch and tone and my pedaling, then I think that's a healthy track to be on. But I did want to just bring that point up. So if you are on the side of do not use pedal in Bach, there's another side to the fence. And I hope that you have at least experienced what it's like to try using the pedal. Because as I say, I do not use pedal to cover up things or to make something more legato and connected. I use the pedal sparingly as a coloring device. And how can you not want more color at the piano, right? So that's my belief. And at the end of the day, what I like to say to folks is that, well, Bach also did not have electricity in his day and age, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to suddenly start working by candlelight. So that's my take on the subject of pedal in Bach. And I'm going to leave it there and show you this footage. And so that completes this tutorial for the B-flat major Invention number 14. I hope that it was helpful. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments or share any of your own practice methods and tips and tricks in the comment section. I thank you very much for watching. I hope that it's helpful. I wish you happy practicing. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you again soon for more performances of Bach's music and practice tips. Bye-bye.